think it's not that long ago that we, like, most of us had that perspective, like that we live with animals that we then ate. Like, it's not that long ago that people had like a few chickens or a pig that, that they were raising for meat. And it's like only really probably in the last 100 years that like so many people have become completely divorced from that. Like, and people are like, I can't believe you can like love them and look after them and then you kill them. And it's like, well, to me, it's not strange. And of course I should love them and look after them. Like, I'm not gonna give them a horrible life because I'm gonna eat them. It's like,
Right.
I don't eat animals. I hate them. Like, I love animals, and I love like being part of this cycle. And like you're saying, like, we're all made of the same stuff, and like we're all really part of the same thing. And it's kind of all a movement around of all of this energy. Yeah, we're really shooting ourselves in the foot by thinking that we're not nature, because it kind of excuses us from having to deal with the difficult parts of life.
Gala, welcome. Gala, tell me where you are and what it is you do.
I am in the southeast of England, and I am a farmer.
And what sort of farmer are you, what you farming out there in Southeast England?
So we've got a mixed farm. Um, it's biodynamic, so organic, so most people would be easier to understand. We're producing raw milk from our milking cows. We've got pigs and chickens and sheep, and we've got a garden that produces salad and veg and soft fruit, and we make yogurt and cheese, and we've got our own butchery, and everything sold through our farm shop.
Okay, so you're selling your own produce. You're not providing for markets and that sort of thing. So you're sustaining yourself out there, huh?
No, I think 90%. Yeah, 90% of what we produce is sold through the farm shop. We do a little bit of wholesale. Mostly goes into other little shops in London and southeast. So
Okay, and
yeah.
did you just strike out one day as a young child and start with some chickens? Is this a family farm? How did this occur?
Well, strangely enough, my whole family are in the arts. My dad's a sculptor, and my mum was working in the arts for a long time, was a curator and various other roles. And for some reason, I always wanted to be a farmer, but I could never figure out how to be a farmer. So when I left university, I studied archaeology at university. I always knew I didn't want to do conventional agriculture. I grew up alongside a conventional farm, and as much as the farm was really nice with animals, and I didn't like all the spraying of chemicals, so I knew I didn't want to do that. And at the time, you couldn't go to university and study organic agriculture; you could only study conventional agriculture. And the other interest I had was archaeology, so I thought, oh, I'll go and study that. And when I finished, I came to volunteer at this farm, which is Floor Hatch Farm, and I basically haven't left, and I've now been here for 11 years. So yeah, and it basically is a farm that is owned by, the main holding is owned by a trust, and then the business is a limited company that's owned by a cooperative, and I'm now one of the company directors alongside some other members of the team.
Well, congratulations. 11 years of hard work.
Yeah.
11 years of dirty fingernails, I'm sure. Um, and so are you guys producing animals that are harvested for food as well as fruits and vegetables?
Yeah, yeah. So we produce the sheep are all for meat and wool, and we do sheepskins from the sheep as well, and the pigs are all raised for meat. The hens just lay eggs, but we've got cross-purpose milking cows, so they produce milk and meat. Basically means they're like a bit bigger bodied than a normal dairy cow, so that they produce quite nice meat. And we've got a Sussex bull, nice big brown bull. So all that meat goes to the farm shop.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And your role on the farm, do you do a little bit of everything? I assume in 11 years you've gotten some pretty thorough training as a farmer.
Yeah, I basically have done all of the different things. I think when you do any kind of farming, but maybe particularly when you do mixed farming, you're like a generalist. I kind of specialize in sheep because they were always my favorite animal, and the sheep have been my responsibility for like the last 10 years. I took them on pretty quickly, but I have been responsible for the laying hens and the pigs, and I also sometimes relief milk, and we produce all our own hay and silage, the winter feed for the animals as well with the machine. So we've done quite a lot of that as well in my time. And it's kind of what's great about doing this kind of farming is you get to do all these different things and learn. Well, there's always something else to learn. Started learning to lay hedges this winter, which is like I never would have expected to have done that. But I've been really enjoying that.
I was telling you before the call started, I grew up in a very rural area, and I had several family members that were in farming, and my grandfather grew up on a self-sustaining farm, and I remember being a little kid and getting to ride around and look at the tractors, and they one of the things they raised is hogs. And so way back in behind the fields there was an old farmhouse, and they basically took this old farmhouse and they took all the doors off of it, and they put electric fence around it, and the hogs lived in the farmhouse. And so you'd ride out there and there'd be these hogs like laying on the front porch of this house, and just this very interesting scene out there. But even these days, I've got a close friend who he and his immediate family live on a larger family farm that they raise eggs primarily, but they also do some produce. And then a few years ago, he decided he was going to get into the sheep business. And unfortunately, that sounded like a good idea to help him to me. And so I was up in the hills with wire and walking up and down the hills over and over again, stringing wire, and getting exhausted. And then since then, he started raising cattle as well. And so the one thing I've learned two things about hanging around farms. The first thing is there are no job titles. There are things that have to be done, and that's it. And however they get done, and whoever has to do them, they get done. And then the other thing is that when you're on a farm, you have to be really good at repurposing things and improvising. And no matter what it is, a little scrap of metal, a little scrap of wood, it can be 1,000 different things by the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. The number of uses. I mean, the fury when you realise someone's cleaned out all of your baler twine out of the truck, and you know that one bit of baler twine is standing between you and the sheep all getting on the road or something. So yeah, you can do a lot of things. We once mended our combine with a double handled bucket, cut it open and you know bolted it on, and it kept the combine going. You can, yeah, it's endlessly creative actually in that way. It's kind of, I think, yeah, some people think that farming is kind of like boring and repetitive, and there are boring and repetitive bits, but it is also a very creative job.
Yeah, I think there's this nice vision from television commercials of the sun rising on the farm, and you get to go out and have your honest day's work. And but the reality is it's probably never ideal. There's probably always some circumstance that has come out of nowhere and brings chaos into your life. And just another day, didn't schedule it, didn't budget it in, and there it is, and you've got problems to solve and things to overcome just to get your normal day-to-day jobs done.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, and I think that's it. Kind of, I don't know. It's even things like, well, it doesn't seem to happen so much these days, but we've been through periods when the animals get out a lot. Like you get a phone call and someone says, "Oh, all the sheep are out," and when I was first farming, you get this like massive panic, and now it's like, "Oh yeah, okay, I'm coming." You kind of, I don't know, you kind of start rolling with it a bit more, I guess, and try not to get too caught up in it, because yeah, I think it can. Otherwise, it's too much of a roller coaster. Kind of have to let it wash over you to some extent as much as you can. Um, but yeah, I mean that you just never know, and as you say, there's just so many aspects that can affect the farm. Economic things that are happening, and whether people feel they want to spend more on food. Like at the moment, we're doing pretty well. I think people are really aware that they should be eating better food, and lots of people are really trying to eat some really good food and are happy to spend a bit more money maybe than they have been in the past. I mean, I think especially in the UK, I think it was like people used to spend 40% of their income on food, and in the last 20 years or whatever, it's like less than 10%. And I think maybe that's changing to some extent. Someone the other day I heard in the shop said, food's really expensive anyway. I may as well buy really good food. And I thought, oh yeah, I hadn't really thought about it like that. But I think once you tried really good food, then you want to keep having it because it does taste a lot better.
For me, I know that having a friend who raises cattle, I can go and I know everything about that food. I don't know. It didn't come from some place that I'm not familiar with, and go through a process that I don't know anything about. So, it's important to me, and I think a lot more people care about it now. Have you noticed a change in the people's perception of that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like, it's interesting because I think we went from a point where it was feeling like anyone who was feeling sort of ethically conscious about food was eating vegan. And I think now the narrative is starting to shift a little bit more. People are becoming more aware that, like, just because it's not an animal product doesn't mean it's better. And like some of those products actually are very processed, and that actually just eating some like really good food, whether it's a really good carrot or a really good beef steak or some really good milk, is what you need to do really, and not be eating the really processed stuff. And I think also being aware that you could, like for myself, like I always ate organic meat when I was growing up. My parents were like quite conscious about that. My dad had been vegetarian, and we didn't eat very much meat. To be honest, like for my metabolism, I probably could do with eating, have been, could have done with eating more meat. I was really anemic when I was a teenager. And I haven't been since I've worked at the farm because I eat quite a lot of red meat. But I'm like, I don't just eat any meat. Like people just assume because you eat meat, you'll eat any meat, and I won't eat any meat. Like if I go to a restaurant, unless I know that it's good meat, I won't eat meat. I'll eat something vegetarian. And mostly I'm just cooking at home, and I'm buying meat from our shop, and I've like either I've raised it myself or I know who has. And I mean, I think that's a real privilege to be able to do that. Like that's not so accessible for everyone, although, I think maybe like during COVID as well, people having time to like look at what they're eating, like not rushing around so much, and like more people doing like mail delivery meat. Like you can buy like some amazing frozen meat from a really cool farm and have it shipped to your house. Like I think there's lots of ways in which it's become a lot more convenient to eat good meat and not just get stuff from the supermarket. But yeah, and I think people are just more aware that they maybe need for their own health to eat better food, because as you say, like people have just become more and more aware how unhealthy processed food is.
You raise an interesting point about the budget and what people spend on food these days, and also the perception that certain diets are just unquestionably more ethical or unquestionably better for you. And I think a lot of people are starting to realize that, my professional background is branding and marketing. And so it's ever since I went to school for graphic design, I've never looked at commercials the same way. Like I see every commercial as a lie pretty much these days. And, that's when you understand what the purpose of marketing is and what a large corporation really requires to operate, you begin to really sort of see through the message that has been propagated that if you eat this this super synthetic puffed vegetable snack, I look at that. Some people are going to look at it and say, "Oh, it's vegan. This is better for the world." I look at that and I see, first of all, I see the packaging, which the packaging by itself came from a massive factory somewhere. The marketing that went into it, they had to build a narrative around it, and they didn't go look at the facts. They looked at what's going to sell. I
Mm.
look at the product itself. If it's a heavily processed product, not only did it take, not only is that going to take a huge manufacturing plant to produce that and to distribute it all over the world, but it's also required the research that went into it, the technology that went into it. All of that was a major industrial process to get it even to a viable product. The
Mm.
ingredients that go into it were probably mass produced. Like if it's got a harshly extracted vegetable oil in it, that happened in a massive factory somewhere. And then the
Yeah.
distribution network of it it requires industrial distribution to make it happen. All of that's got a massive footprint. All of that killed a whole bunch of animals along the way. All of it. Any
Yeah.
industrial farm is killing animals left and right, even if they're not selling the meat. And so I think that we've gotten so inundated with marketing and branding these days that people are starting to realize and have be a little bit more self-conscious that just because they're told something doesn't mean they should accept it at face value. But they can go to
Yeah.
your farm and they can see the dirt under your fingernails. They can smell the smells, and
Yeah,
they
they can walk around too. Yeah, we let people come and see. They can come and watch the cows be milked. Yeah, they can come and see the sheep when they're in the fields here. And yeah, I think it's such a different experience to see that. And I mean, the other thing that I often notice with the way that people feel about farming is we have a lot of concern for the animals, which we should. Like I fundamentally disagree with industrially farming animals, but we don't actually think about people who are producing food, and there's massive abuse of people in vegetable growing, particularly. Certainly, like there's these places in southern Spain where they have these massive areas of polytunnels, and there's a lot of really problematic labour that goes on there. And I know there's the same in other parts of the world, and probably sometimes in the UK. I mean, got quite a lot of laws that are trying to protect people from being abused within farming, but it happens that people are underpaid and overworked, um, and doing really really tough physical labor. I think with like when people just go to the supermarket and they buy like a sweet pepper in a plastic packet that's come from a polytunnel somewhere, you've absolutely no idea who produced that or what chemicals got put on it. And it's that's another aspect to think about, that even if an animal hasn't been harmed in the process, maybe somebody has had a really difficult life producing that food for you. And that's another reason to eat really good veg, not just good meat. That the people who have been looked after who were trying to produce it.
do you serve a local community? Do you have people traveling to come buy your produce?
Yeah, we have. So like we're about an hour outside of London, and there's quite a lot of people that come down at the weekend and do like their weekly shop here. And I mean, lots of people who are local buy their food from us. But yeah, it seems to be like we're selling a lot more raw milk at the moment. Like that's always was one of our biggest draws, because it's not something that loads of people sell, although it has got more. Um, and again, like you were saying about there's lots of people who are like into yoga or health and fitness who want to buy raw milk, and definitely also more people who want to buy offal. Um,
What are they doing with that stuff?
like just eating it. I think like I don't know, liver's meant to be amazing for you, and bones for bone broth and trotters and yeah, all sorts. It's kind of amazing, and I mean I love that we can, because we're butchering all our own animals, we have all of that to sell. But it's great that like people want to make use of chicken feet and all of these quite obscure bits of meat that probably even 5 years ago like people weren't really that aware of. There was a woman the other day in the shop asking she wanted to get beef dripping for her son because he wanted beef dripping. It's like you know what, like 18-year-old kid was asking for beef dripping. It's kind of amazing, but that's all coming out of like the health and fitness, like eating whole foods, eating unprocessed food. So yeah, great.
That's very encouraging to hear you say that. Um,
Yeah.
it's it's a good sign, I think, that there are people who are interested in things like that. And what changes have you seen in small holding agriculture in the past decade?
Oh,
You think it's changed more for the positive?
yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of people. So like in the UK, there's this organization Pasture for Life, and they do they're kind of so they're a certification body, and they like certify people their cattle and their sheep as 100% pasture fed. But they also have another arm which is helping farmers make it's called pasture for profit. And I think it's amazing how many like conventionally minded farmers are like trying new things. And there's also like Groundswell, which is basically like a big outdoor farming conference slash festival. um, I don't know if you know Grove Armada, but he's Andy Cato, and he was DJing this last summer, which was really funny. Lots of farmers dancing on tables, but it's just great because that movement's like is getting a hold of a lot of people who I think are very suspicious of organic farming, but are seeing that maybe the way that they have been farming isn't working and that they need to make some changes. So, they're doing like undersowing. So like if they're growing maize or corn, they're like growing something with it as well to cover the soil, or they're trying to reduce the because also fertilizers have got so expensive, they're trying to like find ways to reduce the chemical inputs for cost reasons as well as environmental reasons. I think like it's kind of better to have loads of people making like small steps in the right direction than like just a few people doing like really hardcore purist farming. And we need both. we need the people who are trying to do the really hardcore purist organic farming, but it's great that like this whole swathe of people who would never probably completely transition to organic farming are like at least trying to do some things. Like there's quite a few people now who are integrating sheep into arable, so where they're growing wheat or oats or something, it starts growing in the autumn, and then in the winter they graze it with sheep, and it basically helps to take off all the dead material and stops them having to use so much fungicide. It's just like little things like that, but I think if they catch on through the industry, like will make quite a big change. I do think we have to be a bit careful in the sense that I think in like being in the UK, we have a bit of a thing of like, oh, America, they have all those big industrial farms. And it's like, actually, the UK does have quite a lot of big industrial farms. And, like you were saying about marketing, I think we have to be really careful about marketing. There's so it's called regenerative farming movement is what I'm kind of talking about with this, like reducing chemicals. And there's people who use regenerative farming in a way that like they would say that it shouldn't have any chemical inputs, and it should basically be organic farming but better. You're improving the soil, but regenerative farming has no legal definition, so it's very very vulnerable to abuse. I keep saying like regenerative plastic and regenerative fashion, and it like in some cases that might be true, but I don't think regenerative plastic is a thing because it's not possible, because it doesn't turn into soil. And it should turn into soil if it was truly regenerative. But I think that is a bit of a concern for me of like organic sometimes gets a bad name because there's some quite like big organic that goes on that maybe isn't like as good as you might want it to be, but it does actually have a legal definition in England and in the UK, different to America, because I know in America there's like I think there's some complications about what organic means. In the UK, it has a very specific legal definition, and so if you use it, it can be legally backed up, and it means there are no chemicals, absolutely none. And it means that the animals, the cows have to be outside 6 months of the year at least, and a whole load of other stuff. They have to have a certain amount of space. There is like legally defining things, so you can't just make it up. And I think I do get a bit worried when we start using terms like regenerative or other things that people like. It's a bit like saying sustainable, or there's all these words that have come and gone, and people, they get so overused that people realize that they don't really mean anything. But I think we have to be careful that we don't like lose the meaning of ones that actually have a legal definition in the sort of greenwashing of food that goes on. But there are like a lot more people, I think, trying to do better things, and that is a good thing. That is a good part of regenerative farming. I just think if we start having sort of regenerative things in supermarkets, then that's a bit of a worry. A bit like when you have the range eggs and there's a chicken in a field and it's all lovely and green, and you think, well, it's not really like that, is it?
Yeah, it's I think in the US, anybody who has like a small business in the US or is an independent business in the US, there's a very strong resistance to government regulation for entrepreneurs and people who rely on themselves to be successful, because usually government regulation comes with a high degree of expense and bureaucracy that doesn't accomplish very much. But at the same time, food is one of those areas where it's not such a clear decision, because I think a lot of people in that position look at the UK and would say, wow, the UK is really overregulated. You guys have massive laws and bureaucracy for every single aspect of life. And a lot of Americans would not feel comfortable living that way. But again, with food, it is helpful because we're we 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 have what we have in the United States is something called lobbyists, and what the lobbyists do, they're paid by these major corporations like Kraft, Heinz, Nabisco, like all the large food manufacturers. They'll pay somebody a lot of money to go to Washington D.C. and probably make our legislators wealthy by passing laws that favor these companies. And if you're a large corporation, it's probably way cheaper for you to woo a couple of legislators and print the word organic on your packaging than it is to source actual organically produced food. And so that's the way the system plays out. And
Yeah.
I agree with you. I buy very few mass produced products. I have a diet almost entirely of whole foods. You know, I have my moments of weakness with things like some processed meats, like pepperoni and that sort of thing here and there.
Yeah.
But I'm very conscious of it myself, and I've come to a point where I just don't trust most companies. I don't trust the grocery store. I can understand that it's not profitable for them to have my best interest in mind. So I have to have my best interest in mind.
I think that's what's difficult, isn't it? Is like when you can go and visit a farm, and like us, you can come and see what we're doing. Like, and we are certified organic, but like people can just come and see. And so, like, to some extent, us being certified isn't so important. But when like the vast majority of the population are going to the supermarket in the city, like then I think that's when like actually having a certification is really useful. Like I would go to the supermarket if I'm away and I can't find a farm to buy meat from, like I go and buy organic meat. And I know that like it at least, meets these particular standards. And, although it's not my first choice, like I'm glad I've got something that I can get and that I trust.
How has your life changed since you went from being a potential archaeologist to a farmer?
um, well, a lot, I suppose. I think I really struggled when I was studying. Like, not. It was actually the first time I'd ever lived in a city, and you could hardly call it a city because it was so small. But I guess I did grow up in the countryside, even though I went to school in a city. And I just like really missed being outside, I think, and really missed, like, I don't know, like even things like lighting a fire, or like cleaning some muddy potatoes. I mean, it sounds a bit strange, but I think there's lots of things that like are very kind of physical, like material things that you do, like if you live a certain kind of life, that mean like every day you're doing something that's like non-intellectual, I guess. And so when I was at university, I ended up doing loads of running, because I just to like keep myself sane, because I was, doing the studying and just feeling a bit like, oh, this is quite strange, really. And also, like, I think doing things that it's really obvious when you've done, like when you like make food, I guess is like an example, like you've like created something, or like, when you put up a fence to move the sheep, like you can see what you've done. It's just there. And I think like that's why I really enjoy farming, is you're like continually having an impact on your environment, like mostly positive, sometimes not. Really, always trying to have a positive impact. And always like kind of, I don't know, sometimes I think you can get like I get too much in my head about like what needs to be done, but then you just can go out and just do the thing, and you can see that you've done it. And that is like I think something that doesn't happen so much when you're doing, even though you fill in your spreadsheet or whatever and the spreadsheet's done, it's kind of a different feeling to when you've physically with your body have to like labor to do something like that offense. And I think like having the relationship with the animals is like quite an extraordinary thing. Like we have closed herds, so our cows, like all of the cows that are here were born on the farm, and we don't buy any in, so they're all born here. And the same with the sheep. We did buy a few in 2017, but that's the only time we bought any, except for males. So we buy in a bull or we buy in a ram, but we don't buy in ewes. So now I'm on like, I don't know, I've got like the great great granddaughters of the sheep I started with, and so we like got this relationship with the flock, and with the herd of cows. And I'm still like, actually just went back to milking the cows. I stopped milking cows when I was pregnant with my first daughter, and that was like 6.5 years ago. And I did milking the other day for the first time, and like there are a whole load of new ones, but there's also the ones I was milking then, and it's kind of like quite special to have all these relationships with these different animals. And I mean, it's very absorbing. We've worked really hard, like over the last 5 years, as a team, to try and actually have days off and be able to take time away. Because I think it's really easy when you're a farmer to like make yourself indispensable or feel that you're indispensable. And I think it's really, really good for you to realize that you're not. Someone actually could come and do it, and they might not do it exactly how you did it, but it would probably be okay. And that's quite a hard lesson, but definitely a very worthwhile one. And I think it gets, the responsibility of it has got easier for me. Like when I was first responsible for the sheep, like I did, I think, worry about them a lot more than I do now. I still do sometimes worry about them, but not quite to the same extent. I think it's quite I don't know, I guess it's a bit like having a sort of, I don't know, it's quite an amazing thing to just be responsible for this whole group of animals that are just out in a field. And you have, they're in the weather, and we don't have very extreme weather really. But I think when you kind of have to learn like what they can tolerate. And we the major thing we have in our, I mean, I don't know, probably everyone has this, and maybe in America it's more that you have wolves and coyotes, but here we have domestic dogs, and we do have problems with dogs attacking sheep. We had a really horrible attack in 2019. We lost 15 pregnant sheep to these two dogs, and like that's the kind of thing that like is always in the back of my mind when the sheep aren't on the main farm. Like I'm always slightly worried about them, and I always feel so relieved when they come back. But it's not like I think I consciously worry about it all the time. But when they come back and I feel really relieved, I think, oh, I've just been like background worrying about the dog attacks again.
Yeah, well,
Um,
in the United States, we have a few more direct avenues to dealing with those sorts of animals than you guys
yeah,
have in the UK. But you bring up a lot of really interesting points. You know, you talk about the fact that your ability to go out and exert yourself physically is a stress reducer for you. You talk about how your family life in your working environment is something you have to take consideration in, and you talk about the fact that you have to let go at times as a professional and let other people come in and either help you or take over for you so you can recuperate. And it's you have a really unique lifestyle. You have a lifestyle that the average person knows nothing about, and the more they knew about it, the less interested they'd probably be in it. And but still, you're those are the same things that almost anybody is considering and wrestling with in their professional lives. And so it's interesting to see how there's some universality to how we deal with things in our lives.
yeah.
What's it like raising a family on a farm?
Oh yeah, it's great. I mean, I think that was so like I'm really lucky, and it's very unusual really that because I'm an employed farmer basically. I did get maternity leave. Um, and so and I mean that's also very different to the US because we get quite a long time. So I think I was off for 8 months with my first child. Um, and like I mean that was a huge learning curve for me being pregnant the first time and like really not feeling very well and like needing a lot of help and not being very good at asking for help. I still don't think I'm very good at asking for help, but it definitely like I had to get better at it because I really needed the help. Um, and I mean, it's basically like made possible for me. Now I've got two daughters, and the only reason like I can work here and have two kids is because my partner's an architect and he doesn't work full time, so he has them more than I do. Um, and I think like I did a lot more of like bringing my daughter along with me when I just had one, but like looking after kids and trying to farm at the same time is like next level exhausting because
Certainly.
that like in the summer like kind of okay because at least they're warm and you can put them down in a pen or something and they can mess about, but like in the winter when it's wet and you can't drive anywhere and trying to keep them warm and you have to catch a sheep and it's just like I mean I'm just amazed like by how many people do like really manage to farm with their kids in tow. um but yeah, God, I just found it so exhausting, and I had two C-sections, so like physically recovering was quite challenging, and getting back to like full strength, like to turn over sheep and do all the other things that we're doing every day that basically involve lifting a lot of stuff. Like it's quite a lot to carry a 20-kilo battery across a field, but to carry a 20-kilo battery across a field with like 15 kilos of toddler on your back is like
In the
maybe
mud.
not a great idea actually.
Yeah.
In the mud, yeah. you know Sometimes it's necessary and you get through it, but as a plan it's definitely maybe not the best idea. But yeah, I mean, as I say, like I'm really lucky to have had support like with them and having time off as well, but like also really really as much as I say like we try and have days off and we try to like not be indispensable, like actually it is very difficult I think to like step away, and especially like with the animals because I think it's always hard to like let someone else do it, and but then by letting someone else do it you can end up then with a really really amazing person who can actually really help you and do it how you do it. And we have got some great people that have come through the farm and have like been learning with us for years who can like come and take over, and that's so important because we're doing like quite a dangerous job really, and you kind of think, well actually yeah, we should have people that like can step in and do it. Really, it's quite important. never mind if you get flu or whatever.
Right. Well, there's also there are limitations to what a person can accomplish. And when you're living on a farm and it's your entire life, you may be out there very late hours if that's what it takes to get the work done, and fatigue and heavy equipment cause a lot of problems in life. So I mentioned I spent a lot of time on a farm as a kid. My great uncle, they lived in an old ancient farmhouse, and he was a full on farmer, drove a combine, raised animals, and it was a wonderful childhood experience. But um, Uncle Jim had his right hand, like he only had the bottom part of his right hand from like for those who are only listening, from if you drew a line from the top of his thumb joint across his palm, he had nothing above that because when he was a younger man, he was trying to fix a combine, and there was an issue with the combine, and it took his hand off. And this would have been probably the 1950s, 1960s, whenever this happened. And he that was, now he had to do all those things you're talking about, but only half of his right hand. And I will say this,
Yeah,
he was very dexterous with that thumb. He could do all kinds of pick stuff up and do all kinds of stuff. But
yeah,
that was the reality, and it's not an uncommon thing, because
mm,
the farmers they were the mechanics, they were taking care of the plants and animals. They were transportation. They're supervisors. Yeah, whatever's got to be done. It's got to be done. So
the thing. That's why you end up being a bit of a generalist. But I mean, I think as well, like as you said, like tiredness is like such a big problem in farming, with especially around heavy machinery. I mean, you're driving some, and now as well. I mean, they've got even bigger than they were, and you know, and faster. They now go 40k, and it's like, yeah, you really. I think I've got a funny thing with track. Like, I remember when I first started driving tractors, like I would dream about having accidents, and I don't have that so much now. Like, but I do. If I haven't driven one for a long time and I drive one, I get kind of like after anxiety about that. Like if you just turn the wheel like a little bit to the right and you're on the road, like the tires are so big.
a tractor can drive over a lot of stuff before it
Yeah,
stops.
quickly. I think it's like I think the evidence suggests that like actually really experienced machine operators are the people that have accidents because they just take it for granted that and they kind of forget. It's easy to forget you're in this big machine, you're doing a thing. It's really easy to forget that there's might be something in the way, or just to stop paying attention.
You said your oldest daughter is 6 years old.
She'll be 6 this year, yeah.
Do you think that is she enamored with the farm life? Do your kids like being on the farm, or are they desensitized to it?
uh I think it completely depends. It's quite funny. It's like one of those things of like they like to show other people feeding the chickens, but they don't necessarily want to come feed the chickens.
Right.
I think the little one does still, so it's still like really fun. But and yeah, it'll be interesting to see with lambing and stuff. But yeah, I mean, they haven't had to come along. I guess it'll be really interesting over time to see like whether they get into it or not. Yeah, especially because like I didn't come. We had friends in North Wales when I was a kid who had sheep, and like I think that's how I started to love sheep. And I used to like go and help on the farm. I used to go and help feed the cows on the conventional farm I lived next to when I was growing up, and I really used to love that. But like I think it's quite a different thing. You see so many, like I know a lot of farmers who have family farms who like went off and worked in the city, until they were like in their until they got to like 30, got to their mid-30s, and then they've gone back to the farm now. But it's almost like if you grow up on a farm, you need to leave for a bit. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Who knows? But of course, I haven't actually got a farm that they can have. So
Right. There's not quite the
they'll have to
family
find.
legacy.
Yeah, it's yeah, it's kind of a different thing. And I guess that's another thing actually I think that's interesting when you like are in my situation where like I'm employed on a farm, like we live in tied housing. So the house is tied to my job. Um, lots of people kind of justify working crazy hours and like not seeing their kids much because they're leaving this farm to their kids. I'm not leaving my kids a farm. Um, and also I think it's really interesting kind of like domestic labor and farming. There's this whole thing about farmers, they work 80 hours a week. Like, no one can work 80 hours a week if they have to do their only little laundry and cooking. If you have to feed yourself and wash your own clothes and clean your own house, like, you can't actually work 8 hours a week. And I think there's like this, the invisible role of the farmer's wife that's been going on, and women who are like, oh, I'm not a farmer, but I feed the 200 calves and cook dinner and take the kids to school and do all the washing. I think it's quite interesting. Like on the farm here, we've got a lot of female farmers, and like you kind of realize that it is quite a different thing. Like as we go forward, as gender roles change, like we're going to have an interesting time kind of adjusting. And like I guess I was quite lucky that when I was growing up, my dad did look after me quite a lot. So I kind of that was like just an assumption to me that like dads did parenting too. But I do find it amazing how much it's still the case that women are like assumed to do like the vast majority of domestic labor and looking after kids. It's yeah, it's quite interesting, especially in the farming world.
Do you think that some of the labor maybe has become a little bit more accessible to women in our sort of modern era? We've got so much machinery to do things, whereas in the past, for example, driving a plow and a mule is not, that's a very labor intensive experience that, you got to have a certain amount of upper body strength to do that. But these days you need to have a little bit more technical knowledge to plow a field because you've got to get in this spaceship with tires on it called a modern combine and do your
Yeah,
harvesting. Um, I
yeah.
don't
I mean, I
know.
think it does, but I think it's also just like I think a lot of it has just been assumed. I mean, like a lot of what I do as a shepherd isn't different. Like I move electric fencing, I shear sheep, like I can turn a ram over and shear it. Like a lot of that is also skill. And so that stuff gets easier. And yeah, I mean I think, yeah, almost certainly, but I think also like that's just helped everybody. Like I don't know a male farmer that doesn't have a back injury or a bad hip or something because and I think it's been really interesting working here for so long because I've worked with a lot of different people because we have a lot of apprentices and volunteers as well as like we've had a fair few farmers over the years, and I just find it so fascinating like that it's taken the team like being mostly female to like just be able to like feel like a human. Like my favorite thing is just to feel like a human farming, that I'm there's no like special treatment or like assumption of skill or lack of skill that's to do with my gender. Because like when I first started, there was like even after I'd been here for like 3 or 4 years, it would be like any guy would turn up and they'd be assumed to know more about what I was doing than I did, which but mostly wasn't true because most of them had come out of a city, so they were like probably starting like at a lower level than I had. And I guess I've always been strong, so like, and there's also like a certain kind of stamina that you get with farming that I don't know has got that much to do with like gym fitness.
So
I don't really know. Like I
holistic.
think, yeah, I think because you're literally getting it from doing the thing that you need to do. So it's And also, like, there is a technique to turning a sheep over, or even probably like lifting a bucket, like, or, there's lots of, I think there's lots of skill in farming that isn't seen. Like, it's still seen as kind of an unskilled job. But like when you see, like one of our gardeners, she's been here for like 14 years. And if you watch her harvest a polytunnel of tomatoes versus someone who's just turned up, I mean, it's so skilled. And it's the same with like cutting the salad or like milking the cows. There's lots of like skill in it that's really hard to see until you have the skill almost. But I think, yeah, personally, I think, yes, farming has probably, it's probably easier to be a farmer full stop, but male or female now, because there is way less labor involved, just like hand mucking out and stuff. But I do also think, like, I mean, women have always been farming. I think they've just not been acknowledged in it. And I think it's just kind of funny how much we still see like a lot of things as being like male things. Like we get quite a lot of people doing like double takes at us in the tractors. Like, oh, there's a woman in that tractor. It's like, hello. So yeah, I think it is interesting, and I've had weird experiences of like, we had a really great apprentice, and he'd like go to the machinery dealership, and like, or they'd all talk to him, and I was like, oh my god, I can't believe they all talk to you. They don't talk to me. I think it's quite funny because I'm quite like sheltered really on the farm. Like there's lots of women here, and like, yeah, I was the first person, the guy that came and did the telehandler training, I was the first woman he'd ever trained. But I don't, like, in general, like, day to day, I'm not like being a female farmer. I'm just farming. And then when you go like out into the world, and it's a bit, people's perceptions can be quite funny.
What you're telling me is that when you're a lady going to shear the sheep doesn't say, "Oh, I'm gonna behave myself better now." They're
Yeah.
just as heavy and just as uncooperative for you as they are for a male shearing sheep.
Yeah.
Do you have sheepdogs?
Oh yeah. I actually lost my sheepdog. I had to put it down.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, in when was that? Yeah, second week of February.
They're
Yeah,
super expensive, right?
yeah, they are. I mean, they're just like so invaluable, I think. And like there's so much they are so skilled when they get good, and so valuable, and save you so much time. And I think maybe they're like becoming like justifiably more expensive because it does just take a lot of time to train a dog and like to do what you really want it to do. I think it's really hard to replace a sheepdog because, like, my dog, she wasn't like the best, but I kind of knew what she was going to do. I could kind of set her up to do the right thing.
She was
She kind of,
acclimated.
yeah, and I think that's the thing. You kind of get used to each other, and they get used to what you want them to do. And yeah, I mean, as I say, they just save you so much time. We had to, like, the week after she died, I had a whole load of sheep. We graze like so like where the cabbages were growing in the garden, we'll put sheep in to eat the what's left of the cabbages and stuff in the electric fence, and there's like polytunnels, and it's quite tricky to get them out of there. And it took 4 of us 20 minutes without the dog, and like with the dog it probably would have taken me 5 minutes by myself with the dog. So yes, I need another dog. But yeah, they are amazing.
So I've never seen dogs working in person. I've seen many videos on social media of it happening. And as a person who has chased sheep, I can say sucks. Sheep are very stupid animals. Well, they're very intelligent for escaping, but they're very unintuitive to the fact that you want to move a sheep to a place where it can get food, and it thinks you're going to murder it no matter what you're doing every single time. So there I've played a little bit of tackle football with sheep before, and they are very, very spry little animals.
Kind of the advantage of having sheep that have been born on the farm. Like in general, as long as they're not in like a new place or in a weird place, they're pretty good. But like when you're all the time buying new sheep and they don't know the place and they don't know you, and like yeah, they can be a complete nightmare.
Well, my friend who raises sheep needs to take some pointers from you then, because a bunch of his sheep were born on his farm and they're a giant pain in the ass no matter what. Literally no matter what you want the sheep to do, they are not going to do it. So it, it's good to know he's got room for improvement before I get invited to help with the sheep again.
You have
But
to chase the sheep. Does he not have dogs?
no, he doesn't, because the dogs are so expensive, and he's got a very small flock. So he probably doesn't sell enough lamb in a year to afford a quarter of a dog. But it's I hope he gets one. I'd love for him to get one. I'd like for him to get one that's a terrible dog, because it'll be worth three of me. But it's still very rewarding though. I love going out and doing it. And it's you touched on this a little while ago, where when you were in university and you were in the city, how you would go to the gym. And there's a natural need that we have, I think, to expend energy in a physical way and to release those hormones in our brains and all of those sorts of things. And you're getting sort of a constant flow of that when you're out on the farm, and there's constant intellectual stimulation because maybe I should say cognitive stimulation, not intellectual stimulation, because you're always looking at something. Nothing's ever exactly the same way twice. And
Mm.
there's you were talking about the skill of being a farmer, which to me is the skill of efficiency of movement. And when you have done something that's a minor physical tax, but you've done it 50 times in a row, it becomes a major physical tax. And you learn to adapt. You learn to do things in the most efficient way possible. So you are able to stand up straight at the end of the day, and um, have enough energy to make it through the process. So, well, tell me this: you say you've got a lot of ladies out there working on the farm. What do you think the draw is?
I think it is like women want to be farmers probably for the same reason men do. In that there's just something about you maybe that really appreciates doing the physical work and being outside, and like also it's amazing to be part of the cycles of the year, and like to be there with the lambs being born, and to be looking after these animals. And I don't know, like it's as you say, like it's different all the time. Everything's different all the time, and you get to observe that. And I think like he's done the feeding, so like every day we go in the morning, we feed the pigs and the chickens. In the afternoon, we go and feed them again and get the eggs. And like everyone's gone through the process of doing that and finding it absolutely boring, like absolutely deathly dull. Like I can't do it anymore. I'm so bored. And then it's got to the other side of it of like seeing like, oh yeah, everything is different every time, and oh this has changed, or oh that's changed, or oh I could do that better, or I could, and it's like I think that's something that's quite, I mean it's probably true of lots of jobs that there's always a way to like get through that. And it kind of comes in cycles, I think, with farming, that you go through another phase of being like, oh I don't know if I can do this, like maybe I'm not any good at it, but you have to keep going. And it's kind of, I think what's amazing about looking after animals is they have their own pull. Like you just have to, like even if you don't feel like you have to. And sometimes like the having to and the going to do it is what gets you over the hump, whatever it is, whether it's your, like imposter syndrome, or like, I mean, I still go through phases, and I just think I don't know anything about sheep. Like, how have I been doing this for so long? Someone's going to find me out I don't know anything about sheep. And then, like the next week I'm like, oh yeah, no, it's fine. You know, I was just having a minute, but you have to just keep going and doing the sheep, even if you feel like you're shit at it.
You make a really good point about how you drive yourself to success in what you're doing, particularly with livestock, because it's really a double it's really a double risk with livestock, because first of all, livestock are worth quite a lot of money, and you have to invest a lot of money in livestock between feed, square footage of space that they require, medication, hours of labor that goes into it from birth to death. But then on top of that, it's a living thing, and you have responsibility for the living thing. And a lot of times, even when you're doing your best on a farm, you're going to see some animals suffer in ways that you can't quite figure out, or maybe you made a little mistake somewhere, left a piece of wire was sticking out somewhere that you missed, and it caused a wound and it gets infected. I mean, those things are just part of life.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think we have a bit of a challenge actually with livestock. That's one of the things people can't quite handle, is that livestock aren't always well. People find the idea of animals suffering at all really, really difficult. But I say, like, I can't even stop my children like suffering. They all get ill, and like, as much as we try and we care and we put all that time into looking after the animals, like as you say, we can't like stop them getting a bad foot, or and obviously we have a choice then how to treat them, and we do our best to look after them, but it's not actually possible to have entirely well animals all the time. And yeah, like it can be really hard, I think, to accept you've made a mistake sometimes. Like, I've definitely made mistakes with animals. I think sometimes my biggest mistakes I felt is when I should have put an animal down, and I've chosen to try and make them better. That's almost like the ones I regret most are the ones I think, actually, no, I should have just said no, like, this animal needs putting down now. And it's such a difficult decision to make. But like, the more I look after animals, the more I feel like sometimes that is just the best solution, because it's treating an animal is stressful for an animal. They don't like having injections, and like, the first day you catch them to give them an injection, they're like, oh, this isn't great. And by the third day, they're like, fuck you, like, don't catch me, you're gonna jab me with a needle.
Lots of
um,
negative reinforcement.
yeah. So it's like, yeah, I think, as you say, like, looking after animals, it's just, you kind of have to, you're kind of faced all the time with your failure. Like, when something goes wrong, like, you can feel it very strongly. um and I guess, like, I just always like really try and learn from the mistakes I made. Every year we go through like what the problems we've had are, and like how can we like try and stop these happening. um and that I always laugh, because I've got this book on my shelf, and it's called The Veterinary Book for Sheep Farmers, and it's like this thick. And it's because there's just, like, they just can have so many problems, and you, like, sometimes, even like this last summer, I had a really, really sick lamb that I ended up having to put down. And like, the vet was talking to all the other vets. I was like ringing everyone I knew, like, what is wrong with this lamb? Like, how can we help it? And it was like, we never figured out what was wrong with it. And like, we still, there is so much we still don't know.
You're
Yeah.
picking up that giant veterinary book, and you're hoping you can find the answer and the solution in that book.
Yeah. And asking the real life vet and all the vet's friends, and all the colleagues of the vet. But yeah, sometimes there isn't an answer, and I think we find that quite hard to deal with. But we still have to look after the animal, or put the animal down if it's the right thing.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's a deeply profound idea though, that you've you have the care of lots of living things, and that means that relationship is a relationship of life and death. You know, you're sometimes you're a part of that animal's birth, you're a part of their maturation, and you're gonna, one way or another, you're gonna be a part of their exit from this world. And there's when we talk about the marketing around food, I think that there are a lot of people who get lulled into the belief that if they change their behavior, there's less suffering in the world. And to a degree, that's true. And there's something in that, that's a noble pursuit for all people. You know, no doubt we should have that moral and ethical mindset. But the problem is that when people get convinced that if they give their money to one corporation or another, it's reducing the suffering in the world, or if well, not I don't want to pick on the vegans and the vegetarians too much. I've been vegetarian at different points in my life. My mom was a vegetarian, but the reality is that suffering is part of life and it's unavoidable. You know, you said you can't even keep your kids from suffering, and that's one of the great that's one of the great symbolic aspects of parenthood, that you love your kids more than anything in the world, but at the end of the day, you've got to put them out there in the world and they're going to go through all kinds of terrible things, and there's nothing you can do to stop it from happening. And so I think that a lot of people really got to break that mindset that if just because they're not consuming meat, they're keeping things from suffering, because everything's suffering. Oh, it's a fallacy, and it's a really immature mindset to think that, you know, because you've spent this or that at the grocery store, you're keeping things from suffering, because it's simply not the truth. You know, when I grew up in a community where, as I mentioned, it was largely agricultural, but also there's quite a lot of hunting. You know, I grew up hunting. Everybody I was friends with grew up hunting and fishing, and that's the process of going out and killing stuff. And also, if you've grown up in the country and you've made it to adulthood, you've probably had to put down a pet at some point yourself. And there is something sad about it. There's something terrible about it. There's something that goes against our human nature, because we love things and we appreciate the beauty of animals, but at the same time, it is a part of life, and it's a part of growing up to realize that sometimes it's got to be done and you've got to do it in a responsible and conscientious way.
Yeah, I think that's the problem as well. Like almost by avoiding that aspect, we almost like are trying to avoid the responsibility, which I think actually can make it worse. I think, I mean, we've got like massive deer overpopulation in this part of the country. Like, I live on the edge of the Ashdown Forest, um, and like the deer overpopulation is so bad, the forest doesn't look how it should look. There isn't any understory. There's no natural regeneration of the woodland, um, and so many people just cannot deal with the deer being culled, and we have a bit of a problem of like people buying a bit of land and then like not wanting to cull deer. And so the deer have all these little pockets that they can hang out in that they know are safe. And then they go out from those areas. But, it's got so bad, like in the drought years, it's got so bad that they're starving, and like, yes, the deer are a beautiful, amazing creature, but they are damaging the biodiversity of the woodland and the potential of all other kinds of, birds and small mammals and insects to thrive. And it's like so many people just can't see beyond the like shooting of the deer. That's
Yeah.
like so abhorrent, like can't get past it. Um,
There's also the fact that they're going to inbreed, and the
yeah,
fact that they're going to spread parasites way more. That's one of the things with
yeah, we
ethical hunting that people don't realize, is that out in nature, it's not like a Disney movie. everything's not frolicking around and just having a wonderful time in the sunshine. A lot of animals got really, really horrible diseases, and they've got parasites in their body that are as big as your thumb. And you
Yeah.
part of part of ethical harvesting of animals is removing certain predetermined parts of the population that may be more vulnerable, or certain animals that will contribute to more diversity in the gene pool. And those are things that nature used to do on her own, but because we've removed some of the natural mechanisms for that to occur, it's become a little bit harder for nature to do her job. And so we have to make some hard decisions sometimes. And even people um, who feel very sensitive and sympathetic towards the animals need to realize that an ethical harvesting of an animal is really a lot of the time way, way less suffering than an animal that's living in an unnatural niche of their environment.
Yeah, I had an absolutely wild experience a few years ago when I was driving. Weirdly, I was driving back from the abattoir and I pick up the sheepskins like from the abattoir so I can salt them and we send them off to be tanned and made into nice sheepskin rugs. And I was driving along and I saw a deer on the side of the road, and as I went past, it twitched its ear, but it was like fully down. So I stopped, and around here you can ring the rangers of the forest, and I'd come and put the deer down. So I rang them and they said, "Oh, someone's just hit this deer." They said, "Okay, we're coming." And I turned around and thought, I'll just wait for them so I can show them where it is, keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't get up and, you know, lollop off. And just when I got to where the deer was, the woman who'd hit the deer turned up, and she was absolutely hysterical. I mean, she'd hit a deer. It probably was quite a shock. But then this guy turned up in a flatbed truck, and he was saying, "Oh no, it's suffering. Oh, it's terrible, blah blah." And I said, "Yeah, I've rung the rangers. Like they'll put it down if they think it's suffering too much." And he said, "They're going to kill it." And I said, "Well, yeah, if it's suffering, they'll put it down." And he picked the deer up and put it in the back of his truck, completely unrestrained, and drove off. And I still don't know what happened to that deer. Just not. But that deer could have just been stunned, and then it might just hop up out of the bag. He's probably someone who's had like a McDonald's for lunch. If it just couldn't bear, I didn't shoot this deer. But
Right.
yeah, I don't know. I was
Well,
like completely flabbergasted.
yeah,
But yeah, it is. I mean, it's really. I mean, I have a lot of people say to me like, "There's no such thing as a good death," and I just think you haven't seen much death. If you
right,
think there's no such thing as death, you've not seen anything die. Because
right.
I've seen some really awful deaths of animals, like really nasty. And yeah, my aim is to get them to the point that they're going to go and have a really quick, death at the abattoir to get stunned. That's the best death they can have. Like I've seen the alternative. It's not very nice. I've got my two small children looking at me through the door. Casual conversation about animal death. Well, it's
Well,
quite funny actually. They both have helped since they were like big enough to stand up. Have both helped me salt sheepskins. And they're like awful when they come back from the abattoir. They've all got veins and blood and everything, and they know they've come off the sheep, and they're like completely used to the idea. And I think, probably like you, I also grew up being aware that meat was from animals. I think it's quite amazing. Like there's so many kids that seem to get to like 7 or 8 and they realize that meat's from animals. And it's like, well, how did we not have this conversation before this point? Because I think it's kind of, if it's that normalized from when you're younger, it's easier to accept. And also, like having that understanding of like the role of the animals in the wider system of a farm, or in, what they're, we have the sheep and they eat the grass and we look after them and we eat them. And it's like, well, why do you have sheep? Well, we like eating sheep, like, and we look after them and we love them, but that doesn't mean we're not going to eat them. And I think yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they go as they get older, and whether it becomes a problem.
It's really a very interesting sort of paradox because I have a unique position in that I see into a lot of people's lives to the degree that Instagram allows that. It's certainly not a clear lens by any means, but I do. I run a really large Instagram account. I spend a certain portion of my day learning about my audience and learning about the demographics and the views of the people that I serve. And there's almost like a persona of a person who is going to decide not to consume meat, and they are going to perceive themselves as being a very natural person and very close to the natural world because they appreciate natural beauty and they love the nice parts of nature from my perspective. And I apologize if I'm misrepresenting anybody. But the reality is that we are in a really pampered state a lot of the times that we are able to ignore the fact that we're a part of nature because the truth is every human being is a part of nature. Every man-made structure is a part of nature. When you zoom out far enough, we're just another organism making anthills on a planet that's going to go away someday, will go away someday, and every individual will go away someday. And just as there's just as there's a sheep's hide and awful, there's that stuff's inside of you too. That's you're made of those base components. They're no more beautiful,
Yeah,
and there someday it's going to go away, and you'll be washed back out into the ocean of carbon based matter that you came from. And you're somebody like yourself who does consume the animals that they're a part of her daily life. You're so much closer to that natural existence than somebody who's divorced themselves from it because of their ideological beliefs. You're right there in it. You're literally elbow deep in it at times, and that changes that your perspective is changed because of it. You see the good and the bad of it, and you see them maybe in balance a little bit more than other people do.
yeah, and I think it's interesting, isn't it? 'Cause I always think it's not that long ago that we like, most of us had that perspective, like that we live with animals that we then ate. Like it's not that long ago that people had like a few chickens or a pig that that they were raising for meat. And it's like only really probably in the last 100 years that like so many people have become completely divorced from that. Like, and people are like, I can't believe you like you can like love them and look after them and then you kill them. And it's like, well, to me that's it's not strange. And of course I should love them and look after them. Like I'm not gonna give them a horrible life because I'm gonna eat them. It's like
Right.
I don't eat animals. I hate them. Like I love animals and I love like being part of this cycle. And like if I kept every sheep that was born on this farm alive, we'd have like over 1,000 sheep now. And we do not have enough land to have 1,000 sheep.
And you
I think
you and you wouldn't have much money.
no, we don't have any money. But yeah, I think it's like that perspective, isn't it? Like you're saying, like we're all made of the same stuff, and like we're all really part of the same thing. And it's kind of all a movement around of all of this energy. Yeah, I don't. I think we're kind of we're really shooting ourselves in the foot by thinking that we're not nature because it kind of excuses us from having to deal with the difficult parts of life. Um,
Which remain there whether we deal with them or not, and they get worse when
yeah,
we don't deal with them.
somebody's dealing with them, like and like I choose to drive the animal. I when I take animals to the abattoir, I take them myself. I get up early and I load them and like I take them down. And recently, I've been waiting for them to be killed so that I can pick up the sheepskins. And like it's over and done in like 40 minutes of them getting there. And like I've done it a lot. I don't believe that they know it's happening. I think they pick up on my feeling maybe about what's happening. So like I try and be calm. And sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes I'm sending a sheep off I've known for like 8 years, and I feel gutted about it. I really, and especially like the old sheep for me, I think, oh, they've like taught me so much and like put up with my inexperience when I started, and like got me through a lot. And that can be really difficult. And I like try not to eat their meat, like if it's in the shop. But like in reality, like I, I think the longer I've done it, almost the easier that bit's got. And you kind of like these herds and flocks of animals, especially ones that are like just all of the offspring of the previous generations, like they almost like keep being the same in a way, because they are a whole. They're made up of these individual characters, and it's amazing how much sheep and cows are like changed by their interaction with you. They become completely different personality if you spend a lot of time with them. Like a bottle-fed lamb that then becomes an adult sheep is a completely different creature to a sheep that's grown up with a sheep, or the same with the cows. And yeah, I think it is really interesting how like you notice a lot of farmers like have one like pet animal, like have a pet sheep or a pet cow in their herd or flock, and it's yeah, you kind of invest a lot of that like connection with that one animal, even if you're like loving and looking after the rest of them. It's like in a slightly different way to that one animal. But I think like you said, like a lot of the time people have in the past would have had to be killing an animal that they were going to eat or putting a pet down. Like it was all just like there was just a lot more visibility of death, and I think we just become quite allergic to death in general.
I'm going to offer this to the vegan who is certainly not listening to us at this point, but maybe I'm too cynical. Um, so I will offer you this thought: as much as you desire to protect animals from their inevitable death that's coming, whether you do it one thing or another, be 100% certain that every single one of them is waiting for you to die, and that from the obvious things of like if you die, your house cat is going to eat your nose, all the way down to the cute little bunnies in your yard. They're just sitting there waiting for you to die and fertilize some grass for them to eat. The birds that your bird feeder, they're waiting for you to die so they can pluck hair from your rotting scalp to make their nests. That's You're part of the same stuff they are. You're part of the cycle, whether you pretend that you're not. Your ethics are valiant, and they got to be informed at the same time. But enough of this self-righteous rambling that I have the privilege of doing, because nobody's here to argue with me. You and I agree with each other. I have a question for you, Gala. What do you consider to be your greatest success in life?
God, not very good at that. Ooh, I don't know. I'm quite a big subscriber to the idea that that I'm just really lucky to be where I am. Like I just can't. I really genuinely can't believe like where I found myself in life. The idea when I was growing up that I would actually like be a farmer and be living where I live and like have my kids and like have been managed to make a life out of farming was like completely inconceivable, and I'd never had a plan of how I was going to get there. So just like I'm just quite amazed that it's happened. Um, and I think, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I know that answers that question.
Well, that's okay. Here's another one. What's the hardest thing you've ever had to do in life?
I think sometimes you just have these moments, like particularly when you're on your own, dealing with like something completely new in farming, or having, I think like that decision, like having to put animals down, like and really like have to convince yourself that you are making the right decision. Some of those decisions have been really difficult, I think. I mean, yeah. But then, like in another way, like sometimes I think it has just been being able to let go of like I don't know, like after I had my first daughter, I didn't expect to have a C-section. She was an undiagnosed breech at 42 weeks, and I had a C-section. I wasn't expecting that at all, and I had an absolute crisis because the whole narrative about having kids and especially having C-sections is like, well, you'll never be okay again. Like you'll never be strong again, and I think like getting through that actually was really difficult to like kind of persuade myself that actually no, like yeah, it was going to be really difficult, but I probably could manage. You know, not like you're going to have to give up. Not only now are you a mother to this child, but you're going to have to give up your whole career, which is, you know, I think that's the thing with farming, it becomes your whole identity. You know, it's like quite difficult when you're not farming to figure out what's going on or who you are because it's so much your life. Yeah, and I think just to like get over the idea that I was going to have to like do things differently, not be able to do things the way that I wanted to do them. Like I think I can be quite a perfectionist with the way I do things with the animals, and I kind of just have to get over that was really difficult actually. Just to like, as you said before, just like let go of it. Like someone else will do it. They won't do it how you did it, but it will be okay. And like ultimately, I have, you know, I think I'm stronger than I was before I had kids now actually. Even though I've had two C-sections, and yeah, that like now having that long term kind of physical resilience that seems to just come from doing lots of physical labor for a very long time. But yeah, I think that that kind of for me sometimes that's been my biggest thing is like my anxiety about things and whether or not I can manage them, and just like learning to just go and do it.
Well, it's a great irony of life that the people who are most concerned about their ability to do such things are the ones who are most able to do them. I think I agree with
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
I agree with you that you're lucky because you've found a path in life that you're well suited to. And that's something that many people want, but they have a hard time breaking out of a sort of predetermined track in life and going out and finding something that suits their nature. You're um you're a very down to earth person and you found a career that puts you directly in touch with the earth, and you're a person who is able to look at things in a very practical way, and your job is one of the most practical minded jobs that you can have. You've got to be practically minded when you're making those kinds of decisions. And also you're interesting to me because you're a defiant person in certain ways, but you're not defiant in the personality type that we typically think. You've got a wonderful smile on your face the whole time we're talking, and very bubbly sort of personality, and you're, lovely to talk to, but through your choices of your life and the path that you've chosen, it's been a very defiant life. You've defined what the stereotypes are in your region for what a farmer is. You have defied the odds of being limited physically from that really invasive C-sections that you had to have, and you've taken those challenges in stride, just as it seems you take it in stride that you've got to go carry a battery across a muddy field. And that's a really effective form of progress in life, is to take those things one thing at a time, and to defy those odds, and you get a lot stronger as a process. So I think you're an admirable person, and I think that a lot of people can uh, find something to admire in your way of life.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I think it's just denial, but
Ha. Well, maybe that helps you get through the day. I don't think there are wrong answers here. Gala, how can people find you online? Where do you want people to go?
uh, so I'm Farmer Gala on Instagram.
And that's
Uh,
Gala.
yeah, and that's it really. Yeah.
And is what did you say the name of your farm is?
It's Plawhatch Farm. Plawhatch.
All right.
Yeah.
And are you guys local sales only, in-person sales only?
Yeah, we basically sell everything through the farm shop. The only thing we sell online is knitting wool
Okay.
and kefir grains, strangely enough, because people really love making kefir.
Okay. Well,
Very good.
we will I'll make sure to annotate all of these things in the usual places. And we actually have quite a large following in London and in the southern part of UK. So if anybody's listening, you're in that area, by all means, go and buy some kidneys and hearts and livers from Gala, and whatever you want to do with those, you do it. Don't put the pictures on Instagram. And Gala, thank you so much for the time that you've given me today. I don't know if the viewers at the end are going to see, but we've had several mom moments where we had to go tell the kids to be patient for 45 more minutes. And I appreciate you taking time away from your very busy life to talk to me.
No, thank you very much. It's been really interesting. Yeah.
All right. And everybody who's listening, thank you as well. And we'll talk to you next time.